We're reading A Course in Miracles, Chapter 11, God or the Ego. And this is Section 6, Waking to Redemption. It is impossible not to believe what you see, but it is equally impossible to see what you do not believe. Perceptions are built up on the basis of experience, and experience leads to beliefs. It is not until beliefs are fixed that perceptions stabilize. In effect, then, what you believe you do see. That is what I meant when I said, quote, "Blessed are ye who have not seen and still believe," unquote, for those who believe in the resurrection will see it. The resurrection is the complete triumph of Christ over the ego, not by attack, but by transcendence. For Christ does rise above the ego and all its works, and ascends to the Father and his kingdom. Would you join in the resurrection or the crucifixion? Would you condemn your brothers or free them? Would you transcend your prison and ascend to the Father? These questions are all the same and are answered together. There has been much confusion about what perception means because the word is used both for awareness and for the interpretation of awareness. Yet you cannot be aware without interpretation, for what you perceive is your interpretation. This course is perfectly clear. If you do not see it clearly, it is because you are interpreting against it and therefore do not believe it. And since belief determines perception, you do not perceive what it means and therefore do not accept it. Yet different experiences lead to different beliefs and with them different perceptions. For perceptions are learned with beliefs, and experience does teach. I am leading you to a new kind of experience that you will become less and less willing to deny. Learning of Christ is easy, for to perceive with him involves no strain at all. His perceptions are your natural awareness, and it is only the distortions you introduce that tire you. Let the Christ in you interpret for you, and do not try to limit what you see by narrow little beliefs that are unworthy of God's Son. For until Christ comes into his own, the Son of God will see himself as fatherless. I am your resurrection and your life. You live in me because you live in God, and everyone lives in you as you live in everyone. Can you then perceive unworthiness in a brother and not perceive it in yourself? And can you perceive it in yourself and not perceive it in God? Believe in the resurrection because it has been accomplished, and it has been accomplished in you. This is as true now as it will ever be, for the resurrection is the will of God, which knows no time and no exceptions. But make no exceptions yourself, or you will not perceive what has been accomplished for you. For we ascend unto the Father together, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, for such is the nature of God's Son as his Father created him. Do not underestimate the power of the devotion of God's Son, nor the power the God he worships has over him. For he places himself at the altar of his God, whether it be the God he made or the God who created him. That is why his slavery is as complete as his freedom, for he will obey only the God he accepts. The God of crucifixion demands that he crucify, and his worshippers obey. In his name they crucify themselves, believing that the power of the Son of God is born of sacrifice and pain. The God of resurrection demands nothing, for he does not will to take away. He does not require obedience, for obedience implies submission. He would only have you learn your will and follow it, not in the spirit of sacrifice and submission, but in the gladness of freedom. Resurrection must compel your allegiance gladly because it is the symbol of joy. Its whole compelling power lies in the fact that it represents what you want to be. The freedom to leave behind everything that hurts you and humbles you and frightens you cannot be thrust upon you, but it can be offered you through the grace of God. And you can accept it by his grace, for God is gracious to his Son, accepting him without question as his own. Who then is your own? The Father has given you all that is his, and he himself is yours with them. Guard them in their resurrection, for otherwise you will not awaken God, safely surrounded by what is yours forever. You will not find peace until you have removed the nails from the hands of God's Son, and taken the last thorn from his forehead. The love of God surrounds his Son, whom the God of crucifixion condemns. Teach not that I lived in vain. Teach rather that I did not die, by demonstrating that I live in you. For the undoing of the crucifixion of God's Son is the work of the redemption, in which everyone has a part of equal value. God does not judge his guiltless Son. Having given himself to him, how could it be otherwise? You have nailed yourself to a cross and placed a crown of thorns upon your own head. Yet you cannot crucify God's Son, for the will of God cannot die. His Son has been redeemed from his own crucifixion, and you cannot assign to death whom God has given eternal life. The dream of crucifixion still lies heavy on your eyes, but what you see in dreams is not reality. While you perceive the Son of God as crucified, you are asleep. And as long as you believe that you can crucify him, you are only having nightmares. You who are beginning to wake are still aware of dreams and have not yet forgotten them. The forgetting of dreams and the awareness of Christ come with the awakening of others to share your redemption. You will awaken to your own call, for the call to awake is within you. If I live in you, you are awake. Yet you must see the works I do through you, or you will not perceive that I have done them unto you. Do not set limits on what you believe I can do through you, or you will not accept what I can do for you. Yet it is done already, and unless you give all that you have received, you will not know that your Redeemer liveth, and that you have awakened with him. Redemption is recognized only by sharing it. God's Son is saved. Bring only this awareness to the sonship, and you will have a part in the redemption as valuable as mine. For your part must be like mine if you learn it of me. If you believe that yours is limited, you are limiting mine. There is no order of difficulty in miracles, because all of God's sons are of equal value, and their equality is their oneness. The whole power of God is in every part of him, and nothing contradictory to his will is either great or small. What does not exist has no size and no measure. To God, all things are possible. And to Christ, it is given to be like his Father. Okay. Waking to redemption. There's a lot going on. There's a lot being said here, as always. As always, so many little subtleties and nuances that we could pick apart and we could talk about. And in reality, Jesus is only saying the same thing over and over again. And I keep saying that myself over and over. If you've been watching these videos, I keep saying that Jesus is saying the same thing over and over again in different ways. And it's very repetitive, but it's repetitive only because we are so ingrained, we are so allied with the ego thought system that we need to keep hearing it, and we need to keep being reminded so that we will do the work, the practice that Jesus is asking us to do. And it really is just to have that little willingness to be open to the possibility that everything that Jesus is saying here is true. But he says, this course is perfectly clear. This course is perfectly clear. If you do not see it clearly, it is because you are interpreting against it and therefore do not believe it. So, if this is not clear to you, it is because you are interpreting against it. Meaning you are not ready to see what it's saying. Because you have not opted, or you have not chosen to look at your fear yet. And that's okay. You know, Jesus is saying, not just okay, it's perfectly fine, really. But Jesus is only saying, if you want to know your true reality, then you will run to what this is saying. You will gladly find your way to understanding this with all of your heart. And if you're not all the way there yet, you won't take this as seriously. It's just, there's a spectrum. It's not like it's, again, there's level 1 and level 2. On level 1, it's either God or the ego, as this chapter says. It's either God or the ego. There's no two ways about it. You only have one or the other. If you side with the ego, God is out of the picture. There is no God. If you are allied with the ego, that means that God is dead. If you choose God, then there is no ego. And what Jesus is saying is that the reality is that there is only God. The ego does not exist. The ego is something that came along with the original idea, the tiny mad idea of could it be possible to be separate from God? That was the original tiny mad idea. Is it possible to be separate from God? From that little thought, that crazy little thought, came the whole ego thought system of separation, and the universe based in that thought system, which is where we seem to be, what we seem to be inhabiting at this moment, at this very moment. And if we really look at it, God is really out of the picture. We don't know our true reality. We don't know what God is. We may think we know what God is, but Jesus is saying that we don't really know what God is. Until God is an experience that takes us beyond the ego. When we go beyond the ego, that means we go beyond our separate self, our ego self. And for most of us, that is very scary because the ego, as Jesus has been saying, the ego will do everything in its power to ensure that does not happen, that we do not go there towards God. And as soon as we start going there, the ego moves from suspiciousness to viciousness, Jesus says. First it's just, the ego may throw you a few monkey wrenches, but then it becomes a whole tsunami of horror. Who are you to think that you can be as God? And Jesus is here to say, but you are. In fact, God is yours. God has given himself to you, which is just a way of saying that you are the same as God. You are one with God, just as Jesus is. The other point that another point that Jesus is making here is that Jesus is no different than you. You are Jesus' equal. Let's read this passage. In the Gospels, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. In a sense, that's true. Here, Jesus says, I am your resurrection and your life. You live in me because you live in God. And everyone lives in you as you live in everyone. Can you then perceive unworthiness in a brother and not perceive it in yourself? Again, we are all equal. And Jesus repeats that at the end, that the equality, there's no order of difficulty in miracles because we are all equal. Every brother is, there's only one. There's only one of us. Every brother, one brother is every brother. I believe that's a line somewhere else in the Course. One brother is every brother. What you do to one, you do to all, you do to yourself. Jesus is not do not put Jesus on a pedestal. Jesus is just showing you what he did. He's just a little bit further along. He made it all the way there. And now he's hearkening back to us, or calling back to us to do what he did. That's all. He does not ask to be worshipped. He's not saying, I'm better than you. He's saying, you are my equal. And I just want to share with you what I learned myself that brought me to joy. And joy is what you really want. Joy is what all of us really want. Let's read this little part here where he says, resurrection must compel your allegiance gladly because it is a symbol of joy. Its whole compelling power lies in the fact that it represents what you want to be. The freedom to leave behind everything that hurts you and humbles you and frightens you cannot be thrust upon you, but it can be offered you through the grace of God. So Jesus is coming through the grace of God. He's not forcing anything. He's not asking you to submit to what he's saying. He's not saying you will be punished if you do not do this. He's not saying you're going to go to hell. He's not saying anything other than, this is what I did to return to joy. Our natural inheritance, which is joy, which is the joy of creation, the love of creation, the limitless love of God, which is really the love of all, the love that is everywhere, in everything. It is in you, it is in me, it is in all of us, and we are all that. It's not only in us, but we are that. That's our true nature, and that is all we truly are. Anything else is illusory. Anything else is just a stepping stone to bring us back to that awareness. So the body, our body is just a means to return to that awareness from this vantage point. The ego uses the body as a way to hide from God, whereas the Holy Spirit uses the body as a way to return back to the awareness of love. Our natural inheritance, remember. And we will not get there until we have gone all the way. We have to go all the way. So he says, you will not find peace until you have removed the nails from the hands of God's Son and taken the last thorn from his forehead. Which is another way of saying that you have to go all the way with this. It's all or nothing. It's God or the ego. But through the grace of God, you will. And the grace of God makes it easy. All you have to do is show up. Show up and do the work, and the rest will come. Another thing that Jesus is saying here is that we are, the resurrection is what he's talking about, not the crucifixion. The crucifixion is what we are still doing to ourselves and to others. We crucify ourselves, we crucify others. The resurrection is what Jesus is offering us, which is the resurrection of ourself, the resurrection of the Son of God in us, and how we are crucifying ourselves. You have nailed yourself to a cross and placed a crown of thorns upon your own head. Yet you cannot crucify God's Son, for the will of God cannot die. Right? You are, because you are God, not only the will of God, you are God, in essence. You cannot kill, God cannot be destroyed because God is the only thing that's real. God is the only thing that is really, truly living. Yet your Redeemer liveth, which is a quote somewhere in the, right? I believe the Psalms, King James Version. Your Redeemer liveth, because God has never died. God is eternal. It's eternal love. Has always been, always will be, always was. There is no time, so it does. There's only the eternal present anyway. So there's no past and future. But in terms of how we think about things, it always was, it always is, and it always will be, shall be. So the only thing that really is for us to do is to accept the resurrection. Again, no one's forcing us to do that. Jesus is just trying to explain why you might want to do that, because you want the joy. You want to live in peace and joy and love. We all want that, because that's who we are. That's our true nature. That's where everything is heading, back to love. So why would you, for a moment, stay stuck in the ego, or stay alive with the ego? That's only just delaying your joy. Why would you do that? One great line here, which is worth just mentioning briefly, is, Teach not that I died in vain. Teach rather that I did not die by demonstrating that I live in you. Teach not that I died in vain. So Jesus is saying, don't teach that I died in vain. Teach rather that I did not die. Jesus didn't die. Jesus is eternal. Christ is eternal. Just as God, because Jesus went all the way home, and in going all the way home, he realized his oneness with the Creator, with God. And in doing that, he also realized there is no death. He cannot die. So teach not that I died in vain. That it's a little bit of a play, teach not that in reality, his body died, right? He was killed on the cross. And whether that's literally true or not, historically true, that's not even an issue here, really. But teach not that I died in vain, but teach rather that I did not die by demonstrating that I live in you, meaning that you show what I was teaching. You demonstrate what I was teaching 2,000 years ago, which others have done as well. You show that the ego does not exist. You can live without the ego. You can live without your ego. You can rest in God and live in God, live in love, and the ego does not need to be part of your reality, because in reality the ego is not real. So I hope this is helpful. And in doing that, you will wake up. You will wake up from the dream, and you will know your true reality. And you'll attain nirvana. And if any of this didn't make sense, never mind. See you next time. Next time we're gonna read part 7, the condition of reality, and we're reading chapter 11, God of the Ego. Thanks for listening. See you next time.